Hi, my name is Dr. Jim Krause, and I am a professor at the Medical University of South Carolina, and I'm going to be doing the webcast today on successful employment and quality work life after MS. And this is a qualitative study, and that is the focus of the presentation today. It's part of a much larger research program. And the co-authors who are not present are Dr. Michelle Mead and Dr. Philip Rumrill. This study is being funded by the Administration for Community Living in the Department of Health and Human Services. It is the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Employment and Physical Disability, funded to the Virginia Commonwealth University, and we are fortunate to be their partner on this project. So the purpose, again, of the presentation is to talk about employment after MS. And this, again, is part of a much larger program of research. The literature is largely devoid of studies that examine subjective aspects of employment experiences of people with MS. So our purpose of the global study is to identify important predictors and outcomes of employment from the perspective of people with MS. Largely our work historically is on quantitative studies, and we are using this qualitative study as a prelude to that study. And it has definitely been a learning experience for me, given most of our work has been in spinal cord injury. And we're expanding and trying to identify the parallels and commonalities as well as the differences between individuals with different types of disabling conditions. So we used a qualitative approach to allow for new insights into the processes and to provide researchers, program developers, and policymakers with a myriad of potential new factors which may impact the work life of people with MS. And this is just the first stage of the process. So our learning objectives are to identify at least two sets of factors or predictors related to quality of employment, and I will present a model that summarizes these, and that is the focus of our overall investigation. Also to identify three common themes of quality employment throughout the work life cycle after diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And so I'll be talking about things, highlighting some themes, and providing some quotations that just bring home the very personal nature of work to the lives of the participants. And the third learning objective would be to describe how qualitative and quantitative studies may work together to clarify employment outcomes. So employment and disability. Employment is central to adult life, and that includes people with disabling conditions, and it's just a fundamental aspect of adult life. It includes many tangible benefits. We'll talk a little bit about that today. Income, health insurance. It also includes intangible benefits related to psychological adaptation and the purpose people find in their lives. And the onset of any physical disabling condition is going to present many challenges to maintaining or obtaining new employment. And one of the things with MS is there is such an emphasis on attempting to maintain employment, given that the disease process hits and may be slow to appear progressive, and so some of the dynamics are different than with other conditions. So the onset of MS typically occurs between the ages of 20 and 40, which are very active years in terms of employment. And so as the illness progresses, there is a sharp decline in employment, with only 20 to 30% employed 15 years after diagnosis, and less than 50% of people with MS are currently employed. Of those who leave the workplace, most of their jobs, most people leave voluntarily, although most believe they are able to work and would like to re-enter the workforce. So there are a lot of barriers to employment after MS, as with many disabling conditions, and that raises the the large issue of what do we do about this. So the federal government and state governments have taken leadership roles in promoting employment outcomes after the onset of disabling conditions, and also among youth that are transitioning to employment. And that nature of the support varies from retraining, re-education, or new education for people. And the support varies rather substantially on an individual basis and also between states. Different states provide different levels of support. And one of the aspects of the traditional support that is state-based through state vocational rehabilitation is that typically after an individual has been employed for 90 days, that there will be a case closure. The case is deemed successfully closed, and that is at a relatively short period. And I'm talking about that not so much specifically in regards to MS, but it is at the core of our research program, is that that employment extends beyond 90 days. It's a lifetime process. It's not about simply categorizing somebody as employed and successful, but throughout their lifetime, what they can accomplish. So VR services take individuals to the first step. They help people to become employed, and our focus is, you know, what happens next? What happens beyond that time? So again, the philosophy of our research program, which we call Beyond 90 Days, is that employment must be systematically investigated throughout the work life cycle, and we must pay attention to quality outcomes, not simply the employment status per se, as if all employment had an equally favorable impact on individuals' lives. So the challenges for people with disabilities, they really tend to begin at 90 days rather than become completed at 90 days. Everybody knows who has any job that you're just finishing a probationary period, if that. So it's just very early on to determine the success or finality of employment. Things evolve over time. Employment is dynamic. It's typically not static. And we want to promote the maximum outcomes that are possible among people with MS or any disabling condition. So until research and practice focus on a wide array of outcomes for people with disabling conditions, then we're going to lag behind the general population in terms of things like quality of employment, quality of life, and longevity. There's no question that within the general population, among people with disabling conditions, that work is fundamental to longevity. It's one of the primary predictors that affects people's economic status, their ability to maintain their health, and just their engagement with life. So our mission is to use a systematic approach to investigating employment outcomes throughout the work life cycle as a prelude to intervention. So key aspects of the research is that we use what we call the labor participation model, and it identifies key variables for determining of attributable differences and related to non-changeable control characteristics and policy effects related to variables that may become the focus of policy change. So what does that mean? Individuals have characteristics that cannot be changed, things such as age. The severity of disability at some point is what it is, and those are what we would call attributable differences. Any relationship between those characteristics and employment. They help us to identify the relationship of employment with those outcomes. But what we're really interested in, and the most important variables, are what we would call policy effects, where we identify relationships with things like access to services, rehabilitative services, education, those things that may become the focus of policy change, where if we identify those relationships, we hope something happens as a result of it. We also value diverse stakeholder involvement in advisory panels guiding the research, and of course qualitative research. That's what it is. We ask stakeholders very open-ended questions. And this is a prelude to developing the quantitative research where we can take the ideas, the things that we're learning now from the qualitative research and then apply them in larger econometric models. So this figure is the only figure I will present, and it shows our labor participation model. And you can see the control characteristics include the demographic characteristics and the disability characteristics. And so things like age at diagnosis, race, ethnicity, and disability characteristics like disability severity, activities of daily living. And then the other part of this are the policy variables or policy effects. And there are a lot of things to work with in terms of variables that can be used as a focus of change. Psychological variables, things like, well, personality is not particularly something that can be changed, but something that can be used in the selection of which route someone may go, employment, the selection of their occupations, behaviors, the job preparatory activities, health factors, which unquestionably both affect employment and are affected by employment, and then the large host of environmental barriers and supports. So this again is our general model. Environmental barriers and supports may include neighborhood profile. They include things like job facilitators, job barriers, job accommodations, work assistance, any of those factors, rehabilitative services that can be changed. They're, again, supportive based from the environment. And then we look at these things, both the control variables and the policy variables, in terms of employment outcomes. And again, this is related to our overall research program. But if you look, so what are the employment outcomes? Certainly post-diagnosis employment, current employment status, those are what are typically focused on. But also other indicators of level of participation in employment, job lapses, number of jobs, hours per week working, total years employed with individuals, the age at which they depart from the labor force, and percentage of time working after diagnosis, and percentage of the maximal work time. So on a 1 year, over a course of a year, what is the total participation level of the individual? And then the quality outcomes. So quality outcomes may be measured subjectively, such as job satisfaction, but also objectively in terms of things like earnings level, job type, type of pay. Is someone salaried or hourly? Do they receive promotions, acknowledgments? All those things that we tend to look for in our careers. And there's no reason that all people don't want to have similar opportunities and accomplishments to, maximize what they can do with their work life. So within now shifting to the qualitative portion of the study and what I'm going to talk about today, and to give you some examples. And this is just to give an overall flavor of the things that people feel are important. We had 74 participants, an average of about 47 years of age. The average age of diagnosis was about 35. So people who had lived quite a good amount of time with MS, all had been employed at some point since their diagnosis, and the groups were very heterogeneous. And they were interviewed together as part of a group process and as part of our qualitative research component. The 3 separate focus groups were conducted at 3 different sites, Ohio, Georgia, and South Carolina. The interviews were semi-structured with 2 group facilitators. We recorded and transcribed the results of the focus groups, and we used in vivo, a program designed to facilitate the processing and analysis of text-based documents. So one of the advantages now, or one of the enhancements of qualitative research now is there are much more sophisticated data analytic software to make sense of the themes rather than them just being drawn individually. We use the constant comparative method. It's a form of latent content analysis. It involves noting similarities and dissimilarities in the data, searching for themes and patterns, drawing inferences about patterns, and confirming and disconfirming findings. So again, far more sophisticated than what could be done at one point in time with qualitative research. And the transcription process and the data analytic methods were all designed to limit threats to validity, as was the use of two-group facilitators to balance each other. So I'll describe in very general terms now and then provide some quotes of individuals. So the quality outcomes, one of the categories was of course compensation, salary, money, pay for health needs, to support the responsibilities and lifestyles of people. So there's always some of the discussion that I've heard over the years is that, this is of the intrinsic benefits of employment, but we can't forget people with MS, all disabling conditions. They face an enormous economic pressure. There are a lot of expenses, some of them related to the disability and some just related to life, finances, providing for family, for kids. So another theme that came out with the quality outcomes was helping others, inspiring others by example, providing direct help or assistance, general helping, value added, and I'll go back to that with one of the quotes that as to how people look at their own employment. And then personal well-being, enjoyment, having a sense of direction, pride in accomplishment, sense of purpose, social connections, something to do, something that drives people, and there's also stress and burden which needs to be accounted for, and the efforts to maintain health and wellness. So now I'll just provide some selected quotes in the next that are covered in the next few slides. I'm not going to read everything verbatim, but they are available in the PowerPoint. So the first one, salary money is a primary benefit of working. We all know that, but it's interesting to hear the quotes of just someone said, like the other participants said, a paycheck. Basically what it boils down to, yes, I love my job, and I like the social aspect, and I like making people happy, but it's all about the paycheck. So money is nice. I was fortunate because I did make a lot of money during my career. So when I had to go from making 6 figures to finally admitting that I had to go on Social Security disability, I got the max. So when people talk about their finances and compensation, it's very similar to how anybody thinks about it. These are the necessities of life. And it's important for people to enjoy their work and have the other benefits, but compensation is very important. So part of compensation that people don't necessarily always think about, so another quote, why do I work? Partly $4,200 to $4,400 for prescription medication every month. You definitely want to have benefits because the medication's expensive. It's a necessity to pay my bills. So those are the types of things. In the last 10 years, I at some point realized I wasn't going to be going for that next step up. I needed to stay where I was and probably keep my job because I didn't want to lose some disability before that law passed. So I settled down. So again, people talking about the personal nature, and so when we think about compensation, people trying to deal with the everyday aspects of what their needs are. So in some cases, people talked about providing money to support the responsibilities and lifestyles they wanted. So even a statement, work's a paycheck that allows me to go on vacation in certain areas. Work means paying for my twins to go back to college. It's a necessity, something I have to do. I need to pay for my insurance and my home and support myself. So it's a necessity. I was scared to death that I was going to end up on the street. Work has always been a central part of my life. So again, some of the things that, it's not a matter of it being nice to be employed after MS or another disabling condition. It's just the essential part of trying to pay for the things that are necessary. And again, here an example of trying to provide for their children. Benefiting others was also a common theme, inspiring others. So again, the example of a person with the 8.5-year-old twins, and saying, I want them to have the example that you don't stop, you just keep going. So what inspires me is to have people come to me and say, I'm their inspiration because I'm doing so well with my MS. And they look up to me and they think if I can do it, anybody can do it. Providing direct help or assistance to others. So I enjoy going into the office and working and helping people. You felt rewarded. You felt like you were contributing to a positive, to the greater good. So here is where we started to capture themes about many of the intrinsic aspects of employment. Another one that was very powerful, but right now and even at the VA hospital, I get up and I get to go out and mix with and mingle with some of the veterans, and I get to help them or make sure they get to their appointments, like being an asset. That's really what I like. So being an asset, so many times people with disabilities can feel undervalued or be undervalued. And so having opportunities to use employment to be an asset to others, to contribute, is very important. My job keeps me going, particularly now. It's fulfilling. You're helping people. Another of the theme of benefiting others. The term that comes to mind is something that I guess I'm used to from accounting, but it's value added. I feel like when I'm working, I'm value added. I'm adding value to my family, I'm adding value to myself, I'm adding value to my employer, and that makes me feel really good. Makes me feel really, really good when I feel like I can add value to something, that my involvement has made a difference, a big project or a small project, but that's it. So another theme coming out, personal well-being, and just enjoyment. So, meaning of work, I absolutely love what I do. The benefits of employment, just mainly happy that I can do it. And when I used to work on cars, and that really made me happy. Just achieving things and getting through something, that made me happy. I'd say my job actually brings me happiness and fulfillment, and I believe that religiously that God put me there. So people drawing relationships to their work, to spiritual aspects of their life. It brings happiness, fulfillment, gives me something to do. I really feel working keeps me going. Identity and sense of direction. So I think when I wasn't working, like you would say the socialization of working and my accomplishment, because I had made it to administration in the hospital after I got my master's. It made me feel good. I was going in the right direction, upwardly mobile in my position. And my identity, it's like, what in the world am I going to do? So when work isn't there, how do people draw their identity? A lot of people do it by their work. What do you do? So people ask, you equate a lot with your job title and what your work is. Another quote, work means everything to me. It's your worth. Just really quickly, I have a lot of cognitive issues. I know that I'm completely different than I used to be. That was the only way that I used to validate myself. So now I'm learning the other parts of myself. So the challenge is when work is not there. Pride and sense of accomplishment. You really feel good at the end of the day because you've done something worthwhile. Of course, it was necessary to pay my bills and take care of myself and my family, but also it was a place I took pride in going to. So again, you see the combinations of the effects of the extrinsic benefits, those necessities of working and making a paycheck, but beyond that, what it means to the individual. Mine was a sense of accomplishment. It was one thing when you're looking at a wooded lot or whatever, and then you say, well, you don't see much there now. But then after you build a house, I built that. Your sense of accomplishment. Sense of purpose. Work keeps me going. MS is instead of moving slowly, I'm moving straight forward. I got to keep going. I have something to accomplish. Work means everything to me. Keeps me active. Keeps me going. I got to keep going. Got to move straight forward. Next. And social connections and social support. Again, within that theme of personal well-being. For me, it also means social interactions. I'd be a little isolated without work. So it's important. It's a huge part of my life. Something to do and reason to get up. For me, it's that drive to get up and work through it because all the doctors have told me sitting around, moping around is only going to make it worse. So for me, it's that drive to get up and be productive. The benefits, like everyone said, achievement, working your mind, having something to do. Like I still work at the office. I mean, sitting around and doing nothing all day watching TV, that just, excuse me, it would drive me crazy. So I have something to do. And stress and burden. Individuals also noted, the stress and burden they feel in their lives. I get angry because sometimes I use my work to the point where I'm a little too tired and to go to the zoo, do things like that. And I think that's wrong. I know I need to stop. I know I need to let go. It will be there tomorrow. So a bit of a different part of the theme of work in somebody's life, and that is, I need to do this. It's important to me. It's part of my identity, but it wears me down. There's a lot of aspects to work that are difficult for people. And with MS, if there's any progression within the disease process, as it frequently is, then it just can become harder and harder to hold on to that aspect of work and to balance it with other aspects. So my gait is affected quite a bit. And even in doing health and safety, I can't bend down and look at different pieces of equipment, but that's what it is. So that's why I decided to move on to something different. So I just have to make decisions, compensate. Another theme was to maintain health and wellness. So keeping your mind active and just being busy, doing something else that's meaningful rather than just sitting around doing nothing. Using my brain. Unfortunately, what has happened to me, or whatever, is I don't really have the energy for play or other things. So a lot of my focus goes to work, but I really like what I do, so that's good. And so I just want to draw a few implications from, again, the qualitative study, but putting it back into the context of the larger work and the larger issue. So again, we tend to focus on employment rates, and we tend to see reports that the employment rate for this people with this disabling condition or that disabling condition is going up, it's going down, and there are sometimes very slight variations, and those changes are important, but we simply cannot measure by employment rate alone, the meaning or importance of work to the lives of people with MS and other disabling conditions. So the emphasis on employment rates itself sometimes obscures the importance of career development and the associated benefits for participation, health, and quality of life. And those themes really come out within the participants' responses. You know, we need to acknowledge that quality of employment will promote health, community integration, and quality of life, as well as sense of well-being. And those are very important outcomes. So there's a balance there. Then that came out again in the individuals' comments. They're working to maintain their identity, working to maintain their income, their family roles, and to support their family, but at the same time feeling the stresses and pressures that come from work. And there's a balancing act there. And so we need to know more about that balance. What are those factors when, as individuals, move through different stages of work, or in terms of MS, through the different stages of the disease process. And then lastly, we need to expand our focus from attempting to improve the portion of people who are employed after disability, to increase the emphasis on quality of employment among those who have become employed. And this is really a much more general theme than specifically with this study with MS. But we always want to try to maximize the number of people who will be able to work out of those who want to work and are able, are physically, mentally, cognitively able to do so. That's always a primary goal. But at some point, those numbers are limited. And so if we want to improve outcomes overall, we can do so not simply by, again, increasing the number or the rate of people that are employed, but focusing on the quality of employment among those who have made those steps to become employed or to maintain employment, those who have, again, from their quotes, most doggedly stayed in the labor force. What can we do to help them, to support them, to maximize their work life, to have the greatest possible outcomes? And that really, from our perspective and the perspective of our research program on quality outcomes throughout the life cycle, is very important. It's not about 90 days or 365 days, but it's something that occurs throughout the work life cycle. Thank you very much, and again, just thankfully acknowledge our partner at VCU and the incredible work that's going on and the importance of all this work to the lives of people with physical disabilities.